You use it every day, but have you ever asked yourself, where does our water come from? Today, we'll answer that question for you. If you need water, all you have to do is turn on your tap and you have instant access to potable water. But that wasn't always the case. Before the introduction of piped water, residents of the Cayman Islands had two main sources of water: groundwater, accessed through step wells, and in later years hand or electric pumps, or rainwater collected via cisterns. But rainwater is highly variable, and it was clear that it would soon become an unreliable source for a growing population. That is why legislation was passed to create the Water Authority as we know it today. So, where does the Water Authority get its water? The sea. Seawater is extremely salty, too salty for the human body to process. So the Water Authority removes the dissolved salts to make the water potable, which is another way of saying drinkable. To do that, we use a process called reverse osmosis. Reverse osmosis involves using high external pressure to force a salt water through a semi-permeable membrane, removing approximately 99.9% of the salts and creating fresh, drinkable water. The first step of the reverse osmosis process is groundwater abstraction. The seawater we are treating doesn't come straight from the ocean. Instead, using deep wells, we tap into saline groundwater. Our abstraction wells are dug 100 to 200 feet deep. That's as deep or deeper than the height of the Statue of Liberty. The second step is the pre-treatment phase. At this stage, we remove suspended solids or organics that may be in the groundwater. The cartridge filters used in this stage of the process can remove particles as small as 5 microns. To give you an idea just how small that is, think about this. The diameter of a human hair is approximately 100 microns. That means our filters can remove particles 20 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. But what they can't remove is salt. Once the solids are removed, a high-pressure pump is used to force the water through a series of semi-permeable membranes, which are very fine filters that are housed in a PVC pressure vessel that removes 99% of the salt. When water comes from our abstraction well pump, it's at a pressure of 40 to 50 psi. The reverse osmosis pump pushes the water through the semi-permeable membranes at 700 psi. One of the byproducts of this process is a concentrated salty brine solution. This extremely salty water is disposed of into deep underground wells, much deeper than the wells that are used to abstract our feed water. But before the brine solution is disposed of, we're able to use the energy inside this pressurized water to run our reverse osmosis plant using energy recovery devices. The next step is post-treatment. Because we're using groundwater as our feed water, this clean, pure drinking water has a rotten egg smell. This is a result of the hydrogen sulfide found naturally in rocks, soil, and minerals. A degasifier is used to remove the hydrogen sulfide from the water, and a gas scrubber neutralizes it so it can be released into the atmosphere. Next, 3 chemicals are added to the water: sodium hydroxide to adjust the pH of the water to neutral, zinc orthophosphate to mitigate the corrosive effects of fresh water, and chlorine to prevent bacterial growth. The treated water is then stored in one of the authority's glass-fused steel reservoirs before being pumped to your home or office. The authority has 11 reservoirs across its facilities on Grand Cayman and Cayman Brac. 9 are in Grand Cayman and 2 in Cayman Brac, with a total storage capacity of 17.2 million gallons. There are over 400 miles of underground water pipelines that connects the authority to our 20,000 plus customers. The entire process is overseen by our team of operators from the control room. This room essentially functions as the brains of the authority's water production plant. Every facet of the operation is connected to the operating system, allowing the plant to run 24/7.
We monitor the plant, all of the numbers and pressures and flows and everything, just to make sure everything is where it's supposed to be. Well, some of the things that we monitor are like the pre-filters, the reservoir levels, the pressures. That's an overview of the whole system.
Is it safe to drink your tap water? Yes! Not only is drinking tap water safe, it's better for the environment because it reduces single-use plastic bottles, and it's also cheaper than drinking bottled water. The average cost of 1 gallon of tap water is only 3 cents. How does the authority ensure its water is safe to drink? That's thanks to the Water Resources and Quality Control Department. The authority's laboratory was the first of its kind in the Caribbean to gain international accreditation. It received its accreditation in 2002 by the American Association for Laboratory Accreditation and has maintained its accreditation ever since.
We are testing water that is supplied throughout our distribution system, and we also do testing for our private request customers, and they typically get tests like chlorine, pH, conductivity, TDS. One of the things we're actually really looking for is bacteria. That is an important thing to look for in our water in terms of potability, because if there's any bacteria that could potentially harm the community, we actually want to make sure to pick it up before the water actually makes it to the community. Without knowing what's in our water, then we can't say for sure that the water is safe. And by doing our work, we are able to actually reassure the community that the quality of the water is safe.
The lab has a dedicated member of staff who collects water samples from across our distribution network for daily testing.
4842.
The authority is also tasked with protecting our country's groundwater resources. The authority manages the abstraction of water from the freshwater aquifer in East End and is responsible for making sure it does not become contaminated through improper managed development or overuse. We conduct routine monitoring of the groundwater through sample wells across eastern districts. Now that you know where your water comes from, the next question is, what happens after it goes down the drain? The authority operates the public sewage system, which is connected to our wastewater treatment plant. The sewage system is gravity-fed and uses lift stations to raise the sewage to the next gradient. Approximately 20% of the island's wastewater is processed through the wastewater treatment plant. The other 80% is treated via septic tanks and ATUs. The authority monitors these on-site wastewater treatment systems via its on-site wastewater management program. Wastewater is water, which is why the wastewater treatment process is all about reducing the impact of wastewater on the environment, a process meant to benefit the environment, not harm it. Wastewater arrives to the treatment plant in 2 ways. It's pumped into the lift station directly from the public sewage system, or it's delivered via truckers who collect wastewater from septic tanks across the island. The wastewater then runs through the headworks, where inorganic materials like rags, sand, and grit are filtered out via a coarse screen.
So this is where we do our preliminary screening or pre-screening of our wastewater. What we have here is a bar screen, and what that does, it takes out the bigger particles like rags and rocks. They get caught in the screen there, and every so often you have this, the fork comes up and cleans it to allow the free flow of water. And from there, we take it through a grit mechanism, which removes some of the grit that's in the wastewater, and we put it through a grit classifier, and then from there it goes into our basins, and that's what we call our influent.
At this point, the wastewater is ready to be treated in our SBR basins. This process is truly a living process that utilizes living organisms to break down the waste, leaving behind a clear water product. The process follows a few steps. The first is fill. This is when the screened wastewater is pumped into the basin with living organisms.
So we're on top of our basins. We have 4 basins. 3 of them are basins that do the treatment process of the wastewater. One of them is an activated sludge digester. So what happens is in each basin, the whole treatment process happens there, but in different phases, and each basin follows a sequence of phases. So in this one, we're actually in the react fill, and the 5 phases are mix fill, react, settle, and decant, and forgot one, wasting, where we waste the sludge out of the basin.
Next is react. Air is added into the basin via centrifugal blowers that distribute the air through a diffuse system. Once the air is introduced, the organisms can start to break down the waste.
What we have here is react. So this is the bulk of the treatment here now. This is where we introduce a lot of air to monitor the DO so that the bacteria are getting oxygen, their oxygen demand, to break down the food that we've just given them in the mix fill and react fill phases.
As they start to feed and get full, they begin to sink and settle into a thick blanket, with clear water left at the top.
So pretty much in the process, this is the last phase that's going through. It's called the decant phase. So once the bacteria has worked its magic and treated the water and eaten the food, we now decant it. Means we put it down into very deep wells down into the ground, make sure that we are meeting the requirements of 30 parts per million. And once that happens, we're good.
Once the sludge has settled, pumps draw the solids from 3 basins to be collected into our ASD, to be recirculated for the process to continue again. The authority has 4 basins, with one ready to be filled, one decanting, the ASD, and another somewhere in the mix, react, or settle process.
So at the end of our treatment process, we pump our sludge from each basin according to a specified time period. For a specified time period, we pump it into what we call an activated sludge digester. And all that we're doing is we're taking the sludge from each basin and putting it here, storing it here for a while. Once the level gets up to a specific level, we then pump the sludge into our sludge pond.
Once this treatment process is complete, a decant pipe is opened and the clear water is fed into a gravity pipe to go into a disposal well. The operations room is the brains of the wastewater treatment plant. This is where our team can monitor what's happening across the system and where we are in the treatment process. The team can check for trends and exact times of various steps to make necessary adjustments.
So in here, this is what we call the control room. What we have here is where we actually monitor different parts of the process. And how do we do that? Well, we do it by a process called supervisory control and data acquisition, also known as SCADA. So we have a SCADA system that brings back lots of information from different sensors and equipment that are out throughout the plant. So here we can tell what piece of equipment is working. Sometimes you have alarms, what a piece of equipment may have failed to turn on. So this is where all the information from the plant, except the lab, comes in here, and we're able to make decisions on how to control the process, how to turn on which equipment we need to turn on. So we all do that right here. So this is the brain of the operation.
The treatment plant also has an on-site laboratory where tests can be conducted and give the team needed confirmations and data. The authority's work is something many of us here take for granted. Most of us will never have to worry about whether or not the water coming from our tap is safe to drink or not. But that's not the case for many in the world who experience the consequence of a global freshwater crisis that's being exacerbated by climate change and rapid population growth. To ensure we continue to provide safe drinking water to the community, we need new water professionals. It's estimated that 1 million new water professionals are needed every year to meet the global water demands. The Water Authority is proud to provide these essential services that are critical for the health and survival of our community. Thank you for joining us, and remember to drink tap water.